I'd like to read from my text tonight from Deuteronomy chapter 8, verses 10 through 18. Deuteronomy chapter 8, starting at verse 10. When thou hast eaten and art full, then thou shalt bless the Lord thy God for the good land which he hath given thee. Beware that thou forget not the Lord thy God, in not keeping his commandments and his judgments and his statutes, which I command thee this day, lest when thou hast eaten and art full, and hast built goodly houses and dwelt therein, and when thy herds and thy flocks multiply, and thy silver and thy gold is multiplied, and all that thou hast is multiplied, then thine heart be lifted up, and thou forget the Lord thy God, which brought thee forth out of the land of Egypt, from the house of bondage, who led thee through the great and terrible wilderness, wherein were fiery serpents and scorpions and drought, where there was no water, who brought thee forth water out of the rock of flint, who fed thee in the wilderness with manna, which thy fathers knew not, that he might humble thee, and that he might prove thee, to do thee good at thy latter end. And thou say in thine heart, my power and the might of mine hand hath gotten me this wealth. But thou shalt remember the Lord thy God, for it is he that giveth thee power to get wealth, that he may establish his covenant which he sware unto thy fathers, as it is this day. Do you ever forget things? Have you ever been in a song service and forget which verses we're singing? I know I do. And I'm looking around the audience or someone looking at lips and seeing which words are they singing. How could we forget? I mean, Brother Andy, most of the time, or Brother Mark, says, okay, we're going to sing verses 1, 2, and 4. We start singing and go, what verses was it? I know it's the first verse. It just happens. Our mind wanders, and it's like, oh yeah, I heard that, and then it's like, we forget. Ever go to the grocery store without a grocery list? Now, if it's just a few things, pretty good. But if you have a long grocery list and you try to do it by memory, I know I can't do it. Sometimes I'll have a grocery list, and then my wife texts me or something, oh yeah, by the way, get such and such, I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I'll remember, don't write it down. And then sometimes you leave the store and go, oh, forgot to get such and such. Ever forget where you put something? Maybe it's just because I'm getting older, but it happens. Working on a project in my house, got a tool out of a place where I had it, took it out where I was working, and then I'm looking where I put it. Never could find it when I needed it, found it later. I don't know. Why do we forget? I guess because we're human. It's easy to forget. But there's one thing we cannot forget. And that is, remember the Lord thy God. Here in this text that I read, Moses was telling the children of Israel before they enter the promised land, beware when you get to this promised land that you've been looking forward to, that God has promised to you, and you have houses that you didn't build and food that you didn't plant the crops, but that's there, and you're eating and you're full. Beware lest you forget. It was God, the Creator God, that delivered you out of the Egypt in bondage and gave you this promised land. It wasn't by your own might or your own power. He reminded them, who led thee through the great and terrible wilderness, where were fiery serpents and scorpions, and drought and no water, but water out of a rock when they needed water. Fed thee in the wilderness with manna. These things, remember, just soon after they left Egypt, how they were faced with the Red Sea in front of them, Pharaoh's army behind them, no place to go. And the children of Israel cried to Moses, "Why'd you bring us out here in the wilderness just so that we could die?" Moses said those words, "Stand still and see the glory of the Lord." And how God caused that pillar of cloud to go between the children of Israel and Pharaoh's army, caused that great wind to blow, and it blew a path through that Red Sea. The next day they could go through on dry land. That doesn't just happen. That was the God who had delivered them out of Egypt. He performed that miracle. And you think, I have thought, how could they, when they had seen, witness with their own eyes the miracle working of God, parting the Red Sea, giving them water out of a rock, feeding them with manna from heaven, how could they possibly forget the God that did that? Yet when Moses was on that mountain there and God given him the 10 Commandments, and I guess they thought it was too long, and they told Aaron, "I don't think Moses is coming back. Give us a God that we can serve." And took their jewelry and threw it in the fire, and a golden calf came out. I don't think it quite worked like that, but it did have a golden calf. And say, okay, that's our God. How could you forget the God that led you through the Red Sea, provided your every need? How could you forget? Our day, God has done a lot for us. You think about our country, from how it was founded on godly Judeo-Christian principles. How God, all the conflicts and all the blood that was shed for our liberty. How could we possibly forget the God that did that for us? Yet by and large, our country has forgotten that it's the God of heaven that gave us this great country. We need to remember every good gift and every perfect gift cometh down from the Father above. Think about our own lives. Look back at the time when you ask the Lord to forgive you of your sins. That joy, when His Spirit witnessed with our spirit that He heard our prayer. That feeling, I remember myself that Sunday night, September the 12th, 1976. I prayed that honest prayer, and it felt like a heavy load was lifted off my shoulders. I knew He heard my prayer. But I remember the next morning waking up, and I guess a lot of times I remember waking up, I just felt that condemnation, that I just wasn't right with God. I remember waking up and I remembered, oh yes, last night I prayed and the Lord saved me. That feeling, Lord, help me never forget that feeling. How good He's been through the years. His blessings, His provision, the challenges, the trials, the hard times, and every single time God came through for me. He's came through for you. Why is it then, when faced with new challenges, trials, uncertainties, why is it the old devil comes around and he says, puts in our mind, what if God doesn't come through this time? What if? Remember, God has never let us down. Remember all the past victories. God, help us to remember what He has done. He likes to put fear, a little bit of fear in there, of the unknown, because we don't know. Every new challenge, every new trial is a new challenge. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a trial. It wouldn't be a challenge. Uncertainties. But it tells us in 2 Peter 1:7 that for God hath not given us the spirit of fear, but of love, power, and of love, and of a sound mind. And Jesus in Luke 12:32 said, "Fear not, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom." Jesus doesn't want us to fear. Some wonderful verses I've used many times in Isaiah 41:10 and 13 tells us, "Fear thou not, for I am with thee." God is with thee. "Be not dismayed, for I am thy God. I will strengthen thee. Yea, I will help thee. Yea, I will hold thee with the right hand of my righteousness. For I, the Lord thy God, will hold thy right hand, saying unto thee, Fear not, I will help thee." Lord, help us to remember the Lord, our God, the one that has done so much for us. And every new challenge, we have to have that faith that God will take us through the next one. We need to remember when we're facing uncertainties and challenges to remember the past victories that God has given to us. I think of David there when he was faced with Goliath. What did he do? He looked back when God had delivered him when he was faced with that lion that came to take one of the flock, and how God delivered that lion into David's hand, and he slew that lion. And then the time he looked back when a bear came to take one of the flock, and God gave David the ability to slay that bear, and God helped him there. And David, just as a young man, a lad, it says, he had that faith that the God that he served, he would deliver this impossible Goliath Philistine into his hands. Why? Because he defied David's God. I love how David put it there when King Saul, he was before King Saul, and Saul said, "Well, you can't go, you got to have my armor." And David tried the armor on and says, "I haven't proved this." But I loved David's response. He said, David said, moreover, "The Lord," remember, "the Lord that delivered me out of the paw of the lion and out of the paw of the bear, he will deliver me out of the hand of this Philistine." And Saul said unto David, "Go, and the Lord be with thee." Remember the Lord thy God. Lord, help us to remember the Lord our God. The God we serve is not just any God. Reading there in Jeremiah, and it talks about, I believe that's where I read it recently, about how the people had made other gods and forsaken the God of Abraham, Jacob, Isaac, and Jacob. And he marveled at, how can you have someone go in the woods and cut down a tree? And then you have somebody take that piece of wood and they carve this piece of wood. And then you take gold and silver and things and put all over that piece of wood. And then you say, "This is our God." How? But they did. How can we forget the Lord our God that's done so much for us? Help us not to make the same mistake as the children of Israel did. The God we serve is a mighty God. He's the creator God. He's the creator of heaven and earth. He is the miracle-working God. He specializes in the impossible. His promises, they have never failed. God cannot lie. He never has. He never will. He's the God of life. He's the God of good. He's the God of light. He's King of kings and Lord of lords. He offers eternal, everlasting life. That's the God we're talking about. Lord, help us never to forget the Lord our God. Is this the God you're serving tonight? If not, you can. I'm thankful that that invitation is still going out, that God's mercy, His love, His grace, we can't even fathom the awesomeness and the amount of love that He has, and we just can't even comprehend it as humans. Yet God is still offering it to that honest heart that simply prays that simple, honest prayer and says, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. And God hears that prayer, and He will hear that prayer and write their name down in heaven just like they did for me, just like He did for you. Lord, help us to remember, looking back on the victories that He has done in our lives, those uncertainties even that we are facing now, the I don't knows. Lord, help us to remember that our God, He will not fail us. He will come through for us. When the devil is shouting in our ear or whispering in our ear, Lord, help us to say, get thee behind me, Satan. My God is the only true God, the miracle-working God. He will deliver me, just as David had that confidence in his God. It's the same God we're serving tonight. Thank the Lord for that. We're going to have a time of prayer, and what a time to come before the Lord. Look back at that day, most importantly, when He saved our soul, because that's really where it starts. And then all the victories, through the years, the many victories. Thank God for them and say, God, my trust, my faith, my confidence is in You, because You're the only true God. May we never forget the Lord our God, but remember the Lord our God. May God bless you. The song is 577. Let's come and pray.